Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, January 20th, 2022. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. Hello and welcome to the show this week. Nothing big happened this week, right? Is that right? The slow news, a slow January post CES lull in the news week. Yeah. Well, it's good to have you listeners out there with us today, as well as my two co-hosts. I got Jeremy Williams back this week. Hey, Jeremy.
What's up, fellas?
Is that a new T-shirt? Have you worn that T-shirt before? It's a beautiful pinball.
It's
T-shirt.
a new T-shirt as of Christmas.
Oh,
Yeah, I think my mom might have given it to me. It's pretty great. Love it.
It's great. It's great. Are those colors supposed to be representative of like a flag, or
No,
are they just?
you go on Amazon and you find pinball T-shirts, and they all use these colors. And I know because I picked it out.
Really?
It was on my wish list.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just like artists out there who were like tasked with make a pinball shirt, and they got I got these colors, and then they put it together and put it on Amazon.
All right, it's whatever they have the most for screen printing. It's whatever the most cheapest colors are to buy in batch for screen printing. Probably, yeah, whatever's hip in the Pantone world. Kishore's here with us. Kishore,
I want to thank one Jeremiah Williams for the recommendation of It Takes Two. We've been playing that as a family. So good.
Yeah.
One of the last games not owned by Microsoft.
Yeah, that is a feel-good game. We played more this past weekend, and it gets really good, and it's heartwarming. It's like a Pixar made a game. It's really good.
Game of the year, from the Game Awards. Yeah. Who publishes that game? It's not Take Two. I remember there was some issue with the name Take Two Interactive and
funny.
It Takes Two. Yeah, but relatively indie game. If you're in the gaming world, you probably know about it. I gotta dive in. It's on Steam. Is it on Game Pass?
I don't have an Xbox. I don't know.
Oh, well, you might need one soon, or you might not. Who knows?
The developer is Hazelight.
Yeah,
published by EA.
All right, definitely not yet owned by Microsoft. Before we get started in the news, a little bit of a PSA. If you're in the United States, if you're one of our listeners here, you can go to covidtest.gov, where you can, in that literally under a minute, sign up to get a pack of 4 COVID tests mailed to you by USPS. I think covidtest.gov there's a link there that takes you to the USPS website. You just put your name, your address. Email is even optional, right? And they will start mailing those out at the end of January. So I say about time, and I'm looking forward to getting them. I heard some minor questions, for people to follow. If you can afford a test, should you should you not order these? But I think the consensus is order them. Better to have them, since we don't know when the supply is going to be constrained the next time. And you can always, give them to friends who have kids who might need them for their schools or something.
Yeah. There's also a plan underway that I think will be released in the next couple of days to have N95s available at all pharmacies and retail outlets. Again, probably a little too late than compared to what we want, but better late than never. And I'll put some links in the YouTube show notes to some great YouTubers who have been doing tests on various masks out there, and you can see the filter efficiency and some recommendations on which ones to buy, because there's a lot of counterfeit masks out on the market.
Yeah, N95. Quick difference between KN95 and N95 is just go for N95.
There's just different measures. So like KF94 is a Korean a certification for particulate reduction. N95 is a American one. It's the NIOSH certification for particulate reduction. It's more important. I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. It's more important for you to get one that is that is real, and then B, fits well on your face, and that you wear consistently.
That's right. Yeah, you technically should not have fogging up of glasses when you wear them. You should be breathing through them, and don't get the ones with the vents, like the ones you may see at like Home Depot, right? Don't get the ones with the vents. Okay, now I'm going to bring a old sound cue because I think it's worthy of this. Let's have our
story this week.
If there ever was a story that merited a top story this week, it's the big news this week that Microsoft has well, they haven't officially done it yet, and he still needs to go through FTC approval, but they have essentially acquired or intend to acquire Activision Blizzard for a mammoth sum of $70 billion.
Only 68.7.
60. Okay.
Norm.
Okay. I'm sorry. I rounded up. Inflation, right? It's the equivalent of how much Bitcoin has raised in the past 24 hours. I think this has caught everyone off guard. Massive implications, not only in the gaming world, but in the technology space. To put some of these numbers in context, the previous largest video game acquisition was maybe like a seventh of that at 10 billion just last year. If you're talking about Microsoft buying game studios, they had previously bought ZeniMax, so Bethesda, right? So Fallout, that upcoming sci-fi. What's the game called? The Starlight. Yeah, Starlight, Doom, of course, all the Quake, all that stuff. That acquisition, that Bethesda, to get open world games in the Microsoft Game Pass ecosystem and Microsoft platform was 7.5 billion. So this is an order of magnitude bigger, and it's always been like, and Activision Blizzard, of course, they have Call of Duty, they got Warcraft, they have Overwatch, they have the Blizzard games, but it's not that many games. It's just very, very popular IP, and I think they also bought like free to play mobile games, King, that went along with that.
I remember when like Disney bought Lucas and they bought Pixar, and there was the same kind of disparity. And they were like, okay, Lucas has a couple licenses we're interested in, but Pixar is a license factory.
Yeah, it just speaks to how valuable IP is and how the enduring popularity of a franchise like Call of Duty that can be enough to make Activision. It's a huge part of that portfolio. You don't need to have a massive portfolio to be worth that much. Of course, their stock price was. Let's acknowledge that Activision Blizzard this past year has been in turmoil with accusations, with lawsuits, with investigations from the state of California, and much of that is still unresolved. So the fact that this is happening is not necessarily great for those for resolution, the kind of resolution that the plaintiffs are looking for, and the word is that CEO Bobby Kotick will probably not be around next year if this closes, if this gets through the FTC.
Well, I think you're being charitable. It was Activision Blizzard has been a trash fire, both because of some failures in the marketplace. They haven't had like a winner out there. Overwatch 2 didn't do nearly as well. Like we can go through. Then all of the culture stuff. They've bled talent. A lot of people left the organization, and literally when I saw Activision trending a couple mornings ago, I was like, "Oh, what now?" was my initial reaction. But then waking to see this, I don't think this is hyperbole. This is the biggest news in merger acquisition in gaming history, maybe. Like this is massive. And as somebody that has switched allegiances a couple generations ago in terms of console, from Microsoft over to PlayStation, and PlayStation has, I think, consistently put out the better hardware for a couple generations. All of a sudden, now I see clear differences here because Game Pass might be the most. It might have been the most attractive like single item purchase in gaming before this acquisition. Now it feels like a no-brainer. Game Pass is a behemoth now, just given the bevy of titles. Can you imagine Call of Duty being exclusive to Microsoft now? Like that's the potential. I don't know if they'll do it or not, but that's the potential here.
There are a lot of we should talk through the implications because let's take one step back. From a Microsoft, how much money they have perspective, the scale of that company. Also, this reflects how big Microsoft is. They're another one of a handful of now trillion-dollar companies. The past couple of years has been very kind to them, and part of that is a lot of that is due to their server business and them diversifying their portfolio under their their CEO Sandela. They had 130 billion in cash. They wanted to use to buy things. They've tried to get into these community spaces with rumors of buying Slack and Discord and all these other companies. And so it sounds like they were happy to pay a 45% premium and pay again to for scope. They paid more than what Nintendo currently is worth. Nintendo's market cap. Nintendo's worth 60 billion. They paid close to 70 to acquire Activision Blizzard. And so the New York Times, if you want to talk about dumpster fires, New York Times had the most dumpster fiery hot take on this, which was this was their move to dominate the metaverse. And so let's get it out of the way. This does not this is, at least in the next 5 years, does not feel like any kind of metaverse play. You said it, Kishore. It's a Game Pass play. One of the most important parts of their gaming business has been the success of Game Pass. And if you look at the consumer trends and the marketplace trends, you went from people paying 40, 50, and $60 for a game to free to play being the big business model, and making a ton of money with mobile and free to play, and getting a few the long tail of how much people will be willing to spend, to now subscription being the big model. And like we talked about a couple weeks ago, in kind of dreaming of a world where Valve and Steam Deck might have a Game Pass like subscription model, it's something that gamers really like or find a lot of value in. Right? There's a lot not to like. There's a lot from a developer perspective not to like as well, and how much money they might be getting. But from a value proposition standpoint, Game Pass has been an incredible value proposition, and this kind of bolsters that and creates new pillars for that over the next decade.
Kishore, I don't blame you for thinking that Overwatch 2 was released because you've known about it forever.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it has not yet been released. So we don't know if it's good yet or not yet. Fingers crossed on that one. Um, I I saw all these articles, and almost every one of them mentioned the metaverse, and in the headline usually. And then they never explained what they meant by that. Did you notice that? Like the articles would say like, this is a metaverse play. This is this is a part of Microsoft's metaverse strategy. And nobody thought to make that the focus of some sort of, hypothetical investigation of what Microsoft might have in mind. I mean, I could imagine, like, and nobody said this, but I could imagine that like Blizzard has built some of the world's best MMO technology, and that they might be able to employ that in some interesting way towards like some further exploration of a multi-user environment, whether it's in VR or not. But maybe I've heard a rumor that like they've been working on something else, right? That Blizzard might have something else that they've had in the oven for years now. Maybe that's a part of what Microsoft wants to buy and turn into their version of Second Life. But nobody's really seems to have any idea what the metaverse is, whether they're journalists or developers. So
That's true, right? Like it's so undefined. It's a
right.
word that Facebook said, or Meta said, changed their name to promote the phrase,
Yeah.
and it said a couple hundred times in a long running keynote. So it is the make stock go up word right now. It is the word. It is the
Yeah.
word to put in to so all the all the investors who are looking to make a quick buck or looking for the next big thing are keeping their Google search alerts on. But it is largely undefined. Not that there isn't definition from from a theoretical perspective or from a computer science perspective. And Jeremy, you're speaking to it from a very optimistic technology perspective, even wondering if there's like a back end technology that this is talking about. But I think what the New York Times and what these other articles are really referring to is IP. What they're referring to is this idea that the more IP a company has, the more power they may have in a digital space, a new internet, whatever the metaverse might be, where the IP becomes the characters and the games and the content that people are attracted to become the doorways to enter that part of the world.
So you're saying, like in Ready Player One, if the
That's
Oasis, if they owned all of those characters that we see walking around in there.
Yeah. Yeah, or like Ready Player One's. I was thinking the exact same example, right? Like the visualization of the metaverse, from an on-screen perspective, you can look to that opening narration of Ready Player One,
The movie.
when Wade is the movie, correct? When he's like talking about what the Oasis looks like. Imagine a world where you can go into Mario Land, and you can go to Doom World, and you can play golf, and that's a very kind of egalitarian perspective, where maybe in very much like a VR chat, where there is not necessarily ownership of those characters, where you could be anyone you wanted to be, but in a more realistic and pragmatic approach, it really would be the IP. Disney would own the Marvel world, right? You wouldn't be able to get in necessarily without a Disney Plus subscription or paying Disney their due.
Yeah.
And in the very same way, you couldn't get into now a Doom world or Call of Duty world necessarily if there's that type of interoperability that the metaverse is promising, if there is a shared
Oh,
underlying
okay.
platform.
Enough metaverse talk. That has nothing to do with this story.
That's true. That's true. It's true.
And I said Overwatch 2. I actually meant Destiny 2, which Activision released, like in collaboration with Bungie, which was just a total flop. Do you think there's any chance this gets blocked? This doesn't make Microsoft like the largest gaming platform. I still think Tencent and Sony would be ahead of them in terms of total size, but it goes it puts them up there with
You mean
with those.
blocked due to antitrust concerns?
Yeah, or yeah, for any, or is it's just sued for various reasons?
I think there's too
Uh,
much competition for that, frankly. Like there's still
Mhm.
EA and there's other huge players. I don't see it being blocked. It's so much money. I mean, who gets $67 billion after this transaction? It
Well, there are a lot of shareholders in Activision Blizzard, and there are a lot of executives who are going to walk away with a lot of golden parachutes.
Yeah.
there's a lot of
new rare
foreign
item.
countries that own
Yeah. Oh,
own a
yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
Activision Blizzard too. Like
Right.
there's a lot of different Activision Blizzard is not like a family run gaming company,
No, it's not a mom and pop. That's for sure. But I think going back to will be blocked. I don't think it'll be blocked. I don't, just the same way that Disney and Fox. I think that's a comparable merger acquisition comparison that was about one big IP factory taking another IP factory. But I do think it opens Microsoft, not just their games division, but their company as a whole, to more scrutiny, and it sounds like they're willing to take that risk.
So,
To,
so let's put you in the position of Microsoft. What do you do with the titles? Do you Game Pass them all and just make them exclusive? Do you?
Let,
no,
let's t-
no.
let's talk about
But
some of the titles. So
Yeah.
you mentioned Call of Duty, but there's also Diablo that hasn't come up yet. Diablo, Guitar Hero, Heroes
Guitar
of the,
Hero. Come on, that's
Come
done.
on.
Are we done with that?
Let-
Tony Hawk.
I hope
Tony
it's
Hawk.
Tony Hawk's on the list. King's Quest is on the list. Of obviously you mentioned Overwatch, Soldier of Fortune. You remember that one? Spyro the Dragon, Tony Hawk, and Zork. Zork is on the list.
Zork. Microsoft owns Zork
Huge
now.
moneymaker. The in-game
Ooh, there you
transactions in
go.
Zork are just don't they own Candy Crush too? They
They
own
do.
that.
Yeah. So they're
Candy
talking
Crush.
about that as being like a major mobile acquisition. I didn't realize Candy Crush was still a thing.
And Blizzard runs Hearthstone, which is the like Magic the Gathering clone, which is a moneymaker. So like there's a bunch of titles that make money here.
I mean, okay, let's be clear. It's like, as much as these games make money over the current period, like however much money Hearthstone or Candy Crush or Overwatch might make currently, that established the valuation of Activision Blizzard previous to the Microsoft acquisition. They were looking to pay a huge premium because they see the business as not what those games individually can generate, but what they can do for Game Pass, honestly, right? And whatever their platforms they own, Windows and Xbox. One way to think about it is they could put all their how many subscribers does Game Pass have? 25 million or so, right? They want to grow that to, 5 to 10 times that. And just like we saw the price of Netflix slowly go up, they want to be in the position where the value proposition of the subscription models becomes so compelling that they become these essential killer apps for anyone who plays games, quote unquote, period, whether it's a mobile game, PC game, game, console game. And then over time, you have the steady supply of these consumers who are going to be just built into these a la carte style subscriptions, and then they can raise the price slowly, 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 and it becomes a reliable bottom line. No need to put all their money on one Call of Duty and have their fortunes and their stock prices go up and down because a Call of Duty has a poor Metacritic score.
Eh, So what do you do? What do you put on Game Pass if you're not putting in all the titles on there? Because I agree, you're not going to put all of these titles in Game Pass, but you are going to put something on there.
Well, Game Pass cycles things in and out,
Yeah.
right? Like one of the unique things about Game Pass is kind of like what Spotify does or what Netflix does is that, but it's more compelling because the amount of you can't equate music, movies, and games the same way because of how much time people can spend in them and how much money they cost usually typically up front. But I think it's a really smart model for them to have these rotating games because just like in the old Steam sales days and the current Steam sales days, people would wait for a Steam sale. Today, people wait for them to pop up on Game Pass, and then they'll
Mhm.
spend their 2 months playing the game, and then feel like they got the value out of that. And then, in terms of how much money they're putting into the games industry, they don't have to think about spending $60 on a game because they'll just wait.
I If I was in charge, I think I would take a hard look about making Call of Duty an Xbox and Game Pass exclusive. Um, because
Ma-
I think that makes sense for the Xbox hardware, and you're not cannibalizing your PC audience because Game Pass is available on PC. And everyone that's playing Call of Duty on PC is playing on, you know, they're playing on Windows anyways, right? So uh, the other thing I would do is I would put some money into getting a Blizzard title up and running. Like we haven't had much movement there on the Warcraft side of the equation in a while. Like, what's the follow up to World of Warcraft? What is that? And like, focus it. Then they have to make Overwatch 2 a big success. Because I think that is a killer game for them. Um, these the other ones we talked about, like Tony Hawk, Zork, like fine. Like they have a focused library of a few titles, but those few titles have so much name recognition. I think it's time to do what Disney has done. Sequelize it all. Like you're going to get regular stuff from all of these titles. A couple of them are going to be Game Pass exclusives. And frankly, I think Game Pass was unbeatable by before this. It's now like unquestioned the best buy in gaming.
Yeah, well, like we said, this transaction is not signed yet. It's going to take another maybe year and a half before it is. So, I mean, there's going to be a Game Pass may have transformed by then with other new titles that have come along. The thing that I find interesting is that this $70 billion didn't come from game profits. Like this is Microsoft money that they got
Yeah.
from productivity sales and services sales. And so like the fact that it's like now being used to swallow up a game company in order to beef up Game Pass, it just feels a little unnatural and just from like a business perspective unbalanced. Because
Well,
that's not where the profits are. So it's just interesting.
but that speaks to the metaverse keyword, the buzzword is that I think that sums up the sentiment that a company as big as Microsoft with this much money to spend would consider game IP and maybe game technology even that much of an investment, that worthwhile. You could say the same thing of Facebook spending and investing so much in VR, right? Like
Right.
they're not making that money from VR,
Yeah,
but they're sinking the money into it
exactly.
because they think that's going to be where the future is. And that you could see this probably the same way. Because sure, you're saying, what's the next World of Warcraft? And I think that question you're asking is where's the next big MMO? What's the next big game where people from a cultural impact,
Hmm.
decide to spend that time. And
Fortnite.
I think that's already come. Exactly. It's coming to Fortnite. The mindset of how people spend that time, it's coming to watching Twitch streams, honestly, right? The shared communal experience of watching a Twitch stream or playing a game like Fortnite with the seasons, with the evolving game in the world, that has supplanted the experience of watching the kind of the questing of MMOs. And so I don't think you need a, it's kind of sad in a way because the promise of MMO was kind of like the promise of this digital metaverse. You would spend time in there. There would be transactions. You build like experiences. Like you come away with memories. But now these memories that you have are really just more short bursts of gaming that you get in a game like Fortnite. Uh, Here's a question for you guys: if Game Pass becomes so successful for Microsoft as they hope it will because of its acquisition, do they need Xbox hardware?
What do you mean? Like it would be a streaming service, or
PC.
Could could they could they make enough money off of Game Pass and just owning content IP so that Game Pass becomes the gaming business for Microsoft, where they just make subscription money and you can have it, people have it on PC or on PlayStation or on Switch.
you're saying I would pay Microsoft a subscription fee and get games for free on PlayStation?
Yes,
I don't.
and Sony would get their cut.
They would share with Sony. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know, man. That seems like a good deal for Sony, but you know,
why not for Microsoft? If it stops people from paying $60 to buy a God of War because they're paying whatever Game Pass will cost to get a Call of Duty
So
and a Diablo and a rotating cycle of games.
I feel like we're inside of a epic Apple like lawsuit brief right now because like what you're suggesting is okay, I buy my PlayStation hardware, I open it up, I can go to like the Xbox Game Pass store and like with my subscription download anything else, or I could just wander to the PlayStation store and like buy titles. Or if I'm Microsoft, I can sell my own hardware that doesn't let you do that last bit of going to the PlayStation store and buying the game. You're like directed into the subscription service. And I think there's always going to be room for a loss leader in hardware to have people live in your ecosystem.
Until infrastructure becomes as good as South Korea, and the Stadia slash OnLive equivalent of Game Pass becomes makes the hardware just exist in the cloud, and latency is an issue.
Yeah, I thought you were talking science fiction when you both were talking about the metaverse. Now you're really talking about science fiction.
Well, cloud-based VR is something that companies are seriously looking in, and if cloud-based VR can be, and if people are projecting that for that to work, then I don't think there's any reason. And Stadia is absolutely playable, and for some people, the trade-offs will be worth it to not have to spend, to not be able to buy an Xbox Series X or spend $350 on a Series S. I don't think it's going to happen in the next, again, like year or two, and certainly not this generation, or maybe even the next generation. But this is all long term. This is all about what's going to happen 10 years from now, not 5 years from now. Yeah.
I'll just end by saying, like, Phil Spencer must have woken up Monday morning, like, totally different universe. Like, he's one of the most powerful figures in gaming. I mean, he was before, but now, like, he's the president of all of this.
yep.
Uh,
It's time
and-
time that man bought a suit.
I don't know. I think the black long sleeve shirt that works.
Let's go back. I hate to go back to just the metaverse stuff, but one of the discussions and the conversations that people have been debating related to metaverse and interoperability and IP is how I can't believe I'm saying this, how NFTs fit into the equation. And there was a really great and interesting thread on Twitter this week from Rami Ismail, who explained over, I don't know, like 30 posts why NFT, the promise of NFTs cannot or is extremely difficult to make work for gaming, with the promise being you own the digital likeness of a character, by buying its NFT. Your ownership is recorded in the blockchain, and in theory, what NFT proponents would tell you is that you get to use that skin, that character, in whatever game that you may want in the future. And I think anyone who has any even the minor understanding of game development and how games work, even understands why that may not be the case, or that may be difficult. But why do people think this? Why are there people? I'm trying to wrap. Why are there people who believe so fervently that NFTs that there is a future where you could buy an NFT of a skin or a character, and it will work between different platforms or different games, or even different games within the same company, which wouldn't necessarily be the case with different game engines and out there.
Man, come on! It's just digital ownership. It's just people.
Mhm.
The stakeholders want you to think this is important. Like they can make a lot of money if you think this is important, and so this is, there's some interesting technology here that is sort of like these little digital deeds. And if it catches on, as it seems to have in the art world to some degree, it'll be good money for some people, not you. But it's all good. And if it's a thing, it's a thing. Right now, it's it's SEO. It's people putting it in their articles so that people will click on them.
Well, just from a game development standpoint, what would need to happen for interoperability between, let's say, of a game skin between a Call of Duty and a Battlefield? I'm just trying to get people to wrap their heads around that. Like, there's nothing that makes those things like similar. Like you can't you there's absolutely you can there's not no nothing you could absolutely to cut and paste. The thing that would be required would be literally them being the same game and just different levels
I
of the same game.
I literally can't have the same gamer tag across like devices right now. Like what this feels so far future because what we're talking about is well beyond the like sign in with Google like effect that we've seen where there's some like mobility across, logins. We're talking about a level of communication between services that are so fractured and disconnected
Yeah.
that it's hard to imagine. So we'd like need like a universal like if you were talking about like my avatar stuff, you'd need like some sort of like universal avatar, a gravatar of some sorts. You remember gravatar?
Yeah.
Um
They're still out there.
uh are they still out there really?
Yeah. Well, I just know I sign it now and then, and it just knows my avatar, so it must be out there.
Oh, I thought that was my like long setup just for that joke, but I didn't realize they were still out there. But yeah, it's like there's so much like cross issues between these services that's hard to imagine. Now, if you're talking about within a discrete service, like if Game Pass was like, okay, we're going to create an ecosystem where you can do this in a discrete area, and like yeah, you can bring in an avatar from Call of Duty and have it show up in Overwatch. I don't know if that even that makes sense, but like I can imagine a world where that would happen because there is shared like sort of ownership and services and systems that could be forced to talk to each other, and there's a financial incentive to do so. But I think that's what's lacking here is there's no financial incentive to do so.
That's the bet, right? The bet is that the financial incentive becomes so great that they force poor developers to shoehorn not just shared assets, but shared systems, and even on the base level, a text gamer tag or a avatar graphic, a square logo, like to share that is not easy. But this promise of something actually tangibly in game, you would have to basically have a whole new system of playing games where it'd be like a shared overlay, a shared backend of some kind that gets composited on top. Because I can't imagine a world where game developers, even if they're working in the same engine, even you're talking about the robustness of a Unreal or a
Mhm.
Unity, part of that robustness is that once you put in the hands of the developer, it forks off and becomes its own thing. They start building their own system, their own rules, and it's not that. they can, whatever gets implemented in one instance of a Unity based game can just quote unquote work in another version of a Unity based game. Uh, Even when it's under the same umbrella of a company. EA tried to do this when they tried to get their studios to all use the Dice Frostbite engine for their games, for racing games and shooters and all that stuff. And it just isn't how development works. And I think it'd be really sad if it ended up being the way development works, because then you're going to lose a lot of versatility and innovation and uniqueness in you know, developers creating unique tool sets that service their types of games or new games that haven't been ever created before.
You could
Yeah.
make that argument today about Unity and Unreal already sort of homogenizing the look of games. You can
Right.
almost tell like what game's been made with what engine, and you don't see software renderers anymore where people are doing very interesting things.
Yeah.
Just to illustrate your point, I feel like that's already the case.
Yeah, the shader look, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and there's benefits to that, right? Because it allows for smaller development teams, and the whole point of that Matrix demo was to show that there's a library of shared stuff that of assets and shaders that developers can tap into to get started. But I think, yeah, it does, you miss the days of the uniqueness of an engine or a unique approach to rendering a game. The difference between a voxel based game and a polygon based game,
If
for
you
example.
remember what it looked like to see Quake for the first time, then you know what that feeling is. Like we don't get that anymore because we just don't, because all these things are done for us. There's DirectX, there's APIs like that. There's also game engines. People aren't writing them from scratch very often anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And games are orders of magnitudes more complex today,
100%.
in terms of the assets required and the complexity of the systems that need to be generated. We expect a lot more out of the games today. Uh, so yeah, that just wanted to call out that NFT Twitter thread, but it may not even be the dumbest NFT thing that happened this past week, because I do want to mention the Dune NFT. What do you call it? A disaster,
Oh, is this the
fiasco,
book?
laughing stock. This is the book.
Oh, yeah.
So, either you want to give a shorthand account of
So
what
first,
happened?
like, it's not the book of Dune. It was sort of like an artist made a conceptual book that includes like some storyboards and some illustrations of that expanded upon Frank Herbert's vision of Dune, and it was put up for auction.
Well,
Like,
the book was like a pitch document, right? It was to
yeah,
make a new movie. Yeah.
It was
yeah,
Hordowski's Dune. There's a documentary about it. This was essentially the storyboards and assets of a Dune movie that was like very close to production, and the creative team behind it was Mobius, was H.R. Giger,
yeah.
all the Dan O'Bannon, all the people who eventually went on to do Alien, for example. This was the project that never was made but birthed the Alien franchise.
Yeah, the reason I'm trying to create that distinction is like I've heard it reported like that it's a book, and people think it's like a version of Frank Herbert's Dune, and it's like no, it's like a bunch of like art and illustrations and like really cool stuff. And it was up for auction, and somebody bought the NFT of this.
No, no, they bought the
But
physical
they
book.
bought the thing and then sold the NFT, like, said they were gonna do something with the NFT of it. Yes, sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
And how much they spent, like, $2.3 million or something on it? Something l
2.6 million
ugh.
pounds, I believe. It was like
Oh,
$3
so
million.
$3.5 million.
And I think it was valued at, and to be clear, this physical book is rare. There's only
Mhm.
20 of them known. And it is a, like, physically it's a book, and that it has pages. It's a bound copy of all the concept art and
Mhm.
storyboards of this never made movie. And it was valued at like $60,000, and they paid 3 million, and proudly tweeted out that they were going to release the book as much as possible digitally, so that people could find copies. Without mentioning two things. One, when they said they wanted to release it, they meant they wanted to scan the pages and release them as NFTs, because it was a NFT play. Shocker, surprise. And two, that high resolution scans of this book and this art is already publicly available. There's like a Google Drive folder that anyone can access and download this. Download the JPEG right now. Uh, and the reason it's a fiasco is that it's so clearly, and I don't know whether they were like, this is a honest misunderstanding on their part, but it seemed clear that they assumed that by winning this auction, they had also acquired the publication rights, that they were within their legal standing to create NFTs or sell digital copies of this book, which is why it made them the laughing stock of Twitter for a day.
I think the most charitable description came from The Verge, who said maybe they did understand that they don't own the copyright. There's some like indications of that, but because they're trying to make an NFT play, they kind of made this like sort of a marketing scam a little bit. Like they SEO'd it, like Jeremy said, so that they could build up hype for what they really want to do was create adaptations, based on the universe of Dune, and sell like animated series related to that. But you know what? There's nothing stopping you from just doing that. Like you don't need all of this. So this might be a way of like building hype. That's the charitable description from The Verge.
I'll go even one further step. I'll go one further step and say they knew they didn't have the rights to republish, but this is so much an NFT play that what they were actually trying to sell was the NFT of the physical page that they had bought, because they said their intent was to burn the page after minting the NFT of their scan. Like this is so much in their belief of an NFT that they think, okay, what I'm releasing to the world is the digital ownership of this physical piece of paper that I won in an auction, which still doesn't get by any of the copyright, any of the and any of the ownership misunderstandings of what buying a book at auction means. But it's I can't.
Yeah, so like this story boils down to: is this stupid? Is it a scam? Is it a stupid scam? We don't know. You pick your which area you believe.
Okay, look, just to put a positive spin on this for a moment here,
Please don't.
I just want to say I'm grateful that this happened because I didn't know about this book, and now I've been browsing for the past couple days through the images that are, as you mentioned, easily found online, and they're beautiful. I love the look
True.
of these illustrations, and I could imagine it being turned into something someday, whether live action or animated. And I think it's nice that it brought it to my attention, along with the documentary, which I haven't watched, but I watched the trailer, and well worth your time.
Totally. You should watch the documentary, especially in the wake of the success of Dune as a piece of pop culture.
Yeah.
Its resurgence in the wider pop culture consciousness because of the movie. The documentary about this Dune that never happened is absolutely worth watching. I have a fan made movie poster of that Hordowski's Dune.
Really?
Painted by one of my favorite artists. That was the imagining of that movie poster if that movie had been released, and it's one of my favorite objects. Okay, let's end this podcast on a real positive note and talk about a little bit of pop culture, because a couple things did get released. One, we had the first trailer for Moon Knight on Disney Plus. This debuted on the first full moon of the year. So you want to point that out?
Oh, is that why they did it? I thought it was because of the football game, but that makes more sense.
I think the moon, the stars, and the objects in the sky align. But this is Oscar Isaac as Mark Spector.
Question mark.
Or is it Mark Spector? I assume you guys have watched it. I assume you two have watched it. Jeremy, of course. I want to hear your impressions as someone who may not be familiar with the character.
I'm unprepared. I haven't done the homework.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll just say, like, Norm, I think he has mental health problems. This guy.
You think?
I actually think they did a really good job of showing that the identity disorder kind of backstory.
Yeah.
Moon Knight's a ridiculous character because it has this sort of like root in like Egyptian mythology, and it's very supernatural. But I think we've broken the seal of that part of the Marvel universe now, where they can embrace it. I really hope they dig deep at that identity disorder stuff and let Oscar Isaac just like have a ton of freedom to play a lot of different identities and like switch back and forth. Um, I don't understand who the villain is going to be. Like the
Oh, Ethan
Ethan
Hawke.
Hawke character, yeah, comes across as a villain, but he has this like David Koresh kind of vibe to him as like a
Kevin
cult.
Bacon, you mean?
Is that? Oh yeah,
But
Kevin
yes,
Bacon. Sorry,
it's Ethan
sorry.
Hawke who looks like Kevin Bacon.
Yeah,
But yes, has a cult leader vibe. Yes.
yeah, like it has a David Koresh vibe to it. So I'm very curious what the villain storyline is. But Oscar Isaac, when has he ever failed as like a Egyptian related superhero?
Oh
It's
no.
never happened.
Kishore is referring to him as Apocalypse and X-Men Apocalypse, with unrecognizable Oscar Isaac in a terrible rendition
No kidding.
of a mutant fan favorite mutant villain. So one, the look of the series looks a cut above, I think, even the other Marvel series that we've seen so far. It looks like a movie. It looks like a movie trailer, and their use of lighting and shadow of locations. It did not. If they shot this in Atlanta, props to them, because it did not look like Atlanta.
It is Ethan Hawke. It's not Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, it's Ethan Hawke, but he looks like Kevin Bacon. That's the joke I was making.
Oh, got it. Okay.
My fear is that because he's such a unfamiliar character, and I know it looks like they're leaning into the multiple personalities of the character, that they're going to slow play that a little bit too much, and we don't need that to be a reveal, because his marvelcomics.com page, Wikipedia page, explains his character. And so I hope that they don't just wait until episode 6 for all the personalities to come out. Let that come out early. And the supernatural stuff, I also think that they're not going to have as many Marvel tie-ins, and I think that's a good thing. I think that it was one of the things that people complained about with Eternals, is that there weren't as many Marvel MCU tie-ins, and actually liked it because of that. It felt more of a standalone story, and I think that this, from the trailer at least, it looks like it could be more of a standalone story, and I'm really happy for that.
This looks unsettling.
It's supposed to be.
Do you think is Ethan Hawke and what's his name, Isaac?
Oscar
Isaac? Are they the same? Is it like a Fight Club thing?
Oh, interesting.
That's a nice theory. It's funny because Kevin Bacon. I don't want to spoil Mr. Robot, but there's Mr. Robot allusions here and there, or comparisons to be made, and that was Kevin Bacon. One of the things that people have said is that they hope, and I agree with them, by the end of the series, you are, as a viewer, left questioning whether what you saw was in his head versus what you saw happened in, quote unquote, the real world, and you are going to be required to rewatch the series to parse the reality versus
I could see that. So that's interesting. So like by the end of the series, you should have a better idea about what's real, I suppose.
Yeah, but it may force you to rewatch the show,
right,
which I love. I love shows that
me
do
too.
that.
As long as they don't go where like Tenet went, where you're like, what did happen? And
Yeah,
like
that's when I didn't bother rewatching. I was like, I won't get it the second time either.
You got to watch it backwards.
Yeah.
The Lord of the Rings show has a name now. It's called The Rings of Power. Whatever. I'm indifferent to that.
A Lord of the Rings geek, you're going to be super into this because supposedly the estate has had a lot of say into the story development and inspiration. So if you're like, we need to respect the source material, I think this might be the series for you.
And then there's a first trailer for Cuphead on Netflix, and good news for Cuphead game fans, it looks like it preserves the aesthetic and the animation quality that we saw from the video game. And it won't require you dying a ton of times to watch and play it. So easier to play or watch than to play. I'll give one last shout out. Peacemaker on HBO Max. This is the spinoff of basically a continuation of the Suicide Squad that James Gunn wrote and directed. He wrote and directed all 8 episodes of this show. I love it. It is more enjoyable for me to watch than Boba Fett. And tonally, it's as dark as like The Boys, but I like it more than The Boys.
Yeah, but the show everybody's talking about is Yellow Jackets, and I don't have Showtime. Who has Showtime? How come everybody has Showtime all of a sudden?
I don't have it either.
Yeah,
I don't have it.
Dexter? Yeah.
You see?
Yep.
There we are.
Goes our pop culture haul.
I-
All right.
I'm all about Station 11 right now. Just incredible storytelling. I know I'm pushing this another week. I am done with Android. I think the problems with the Pixel 6 have mounted so dramatically. Like I can barely get it to work as a 120 hertz phone anymore. And just like I have this ridiculous bug that won't go away, and nothing is improving. Uh, I'm so frustrated.
Oh dear.
Maybe we'll have a therapy session next week,
Oh.
where you can offload onto us, because I'm sure next week won't be as exciting a news week.
And I will say on Sunday, I will do a deep dive. On Sunday, the James Webb Telescope will reach the Lagrange point 2, L2, which is its orbit around the sun, and will allow its sort of final sort of testing phases over the next couple months before it actually goes into use, which is very exciting for the James Webb. It's been a long journey to get there, and it's just one of the more incredible scientific achievements in terms of hardware deployment ever.
When do we expect the first photos?
Months.
Oh, that's not much. Okay, great.
Oh. That does it for this week. We're out of time. We got meetings to go to. Thank you all for joining us. And I'll give a shout out to Joel, who's been setting up some great outros. I'm going to play one for you right now before we sign off. Jeremy Shore, good to see you guys. And we will see you next week. Here we go.
Hi there, I didn't see you.
There aren't a lot of desserts.
Quiche. Sweet quiche? There's not. Quiche. Sweet quiche? Quiche. There's not.
We miss our quiche.
There goes your Android tie-in. All right.
Yeah.
See you next week.
Never sweet quiche. Never.